In today's stories, we follow the 6 most tragic deaths in theme park history, from a woman who stepped off a bungee platform with a harness nobody had properly tested, to a grandmother looking through her camera when 5 tons of float came up from behind, with nothing between her but some inches of open ground. It was October 18, 2016, in northern Georgia. A regional theme park was running its annual Halloween event, drawing some of its largest crowds of the year. A walk-through haunted house on the park's east side had been operating every October weekend for the previous 4 seasons. Connie Bredlow was 41 and worked as a billing coordinator at a dental office 20 minutes from her house. She commuted the same route every day, brought her lunch, and was home by 6 p.m. most evenings. She was organized and detail-oriented, the kind of person who liked to understand how things worked before making decisions. Once she felt confident about a situation, she trusted her own judgment. She was not reckless, but she tended to rely on her own reasoning rather than automatically following every rule placed in front of her. She had brought her 13-year-old nephew to the park as part of a routine they kept throughout the year. Once a month, they would go somewhere together, his choice during the summer and hers in the fall. The haunted attraction was a seasonal installation, assembled each fall inside a permanent building shell. The interior was lined with black polyester fabric panels, foam-carved wall sections, and multiple fog machines. The building had no sprinkler system. Emergency exit signs had been installed throughout, but each operating night staff covered them with black fabric to keep the green glow from breaking the visual atmosphere. On the night Connie and her nephew attended, a fog machine near the midpoint of the walkthrough overheated and ignited the polyester fabric panel hanging directly above it. The material caught fire within seconds. Smoke filled the midpoint section almost immediately. Guests pushed back toward the entrance through the narrow corridor, and Connie and her nephew became separated in the movement. Her nephew exited with a group of other guests, sustaining minor burns to his forearms from a fabric panel that had caught along the corridor wall near the exit. Connie moved in the opposite direction, deeper into the structure, looking for another way out. In a functioning attraction, that decision would have been reasonable. The exit was ahead, not behind. But with the signage covered and visibility collapsing in the smoke, she had no way of knowing how far the exit was or where it was positioned. She located a door in the rear section. It was a marked emergency exit. She pushed on it. It did not open. The door had been zip-tied shut from the outside by a staff member at the start of the operating night to prevent guests from exiting into a backstage area. This had been standard practice throughout the entire season. Connie pushed on the door repeatedly. The smoke in that section was dense. She did not move away from the door. A staff member entering through a service access after the fire was brought under control found her on the floor 18 inches from the door. She had been in heavy smoke exposure for approximately 9 minutes. Connie died from the smoke inhalation. Her nephew was located outside and treated for minor burns to his forearms. The investigation found that the fog machine responsible for the ignition had been overheating for 2 consecutive operating days with no maintenance report filed. Polyester fabric lined much of the interior wall space inside the attraction. The material ignites quickly and produces dense black smoke, accelerating both the fire spread and the loss of visibility inside the corridor. The exit signs had been covered every operating night of the season. The emergency door Connie could not open had been zip-tied shut from the outside each night as a routine measure to keep guests away from backstage areas. Neither practice had been flagged or corrected at any point during the 4 seasons the attraction had operated. The case was ruled accidental. The park permanently discontinued the haunted attraction following the incident. A covered exit sign and a zip-tied door were all that stood between Connie and the way out. Next, father and daughter in Missouri about to ride a flume they'd already been on twice, and a defect in the dark that nobody had ever bothered to fix. It was July 12, 2018, in central Missouri. A regional theme park was running at steady summer capacity on a Thursday afternoon. The log flume ride sat near the back quarter of the park, one of the oldest attractions on the grounds, and had been operating continuously since the park's original construction in the late 1970s. Ruthie Gabbard was 16 and had just finished her sophomore year of high school. She lived with her parents and an older brother in a small house outside of town and was spending the summer at home before the next school year began. She lived with her parents and an older brother in a small house outside of town and was spending the summer at home before the next school year began. She was on the smaller side for her age, but tall enough to meet the ride's height requirement. Her father Boyd had taken her to the park as an end-of-summer trip, just the two of them. Ruthie had picked the log flume first. Boyd had ridden it with her twice already that afternoon when she asked to go again. A section of the concrete channel floor inside the third enclosed tunnel had developed a raised lip from decades of water erosion. Logs occasionally caught on the raised section before the current pushed them free, a problem documented 11 times over the previous season with no structural repair ever scheduled. On the afternoon of the incident, the water flow was running below standard due to a pump flagged for service earlier that week and not repaired. At reduced flow, the current was no longer strong enough to push a fully loaded log free once it caught on the lip. Boyd and Ruthie's log entered the third tunnel at normal speed. Midway through, the front caught on the raised lip and the boat lurched to a stop. The back rode up slightly while the front dipped into the channel. Water from the moving current began pushing over the front edge of the boat. The tunnel was enclosed and dark. Boyd braced against the rear seat as the log tilted forward. Ruthie, seated at the front, was pushed into the channel as the bow dipped and water came over the edge. The current held the boat pinned at its angled position. Ruthie was caught between the front of the log and the concrete channel floor in fast-moving shallow water in complete darkness. The angle of the log and the force of the current pressing against it kept her pinned against the channel floor. Boyd could not generate the leverage needed to lift the front end from his position at the rear of the tilted boat. Boyd called out repeatedly. The sound did not carry past the tunnel entrance. At the exit terminal, an operator noticed the log had not emerged at its expected return time and sent a staff member into the service corridor on foot. The corridor ran alongside the tunnel, but the nearest access point to the third section required the staff member to travel the full length of the corridor before reaching it. Ruthie was pulled from the water at the third tunnel access point. She was breathing when recovered, but went into cardiac arrest on the dock within minutes and could not be revived. In adolescence, oxygen deprivation during a submersion event can trigger cardiac arrest shortly after rescue, even when breathing appears to have resumed. The case was ruled accidental. Maintenance records documenting the snagging defect across 11 prior incidents were submitted during the subsequent review. The ride was permanently closed following the incident. The pump running below capacity that afternoon had also been flagged for service earlier in the week without a repair being completed. Boyd was present on the dock when Ruthie went into cardiac arrest and was the only witness to the full sequence inside the tunnel. Ruthie went into cardiac arrest on the dock while her father stood there unable to do anything. Up next, in Central Florida, an elderly woman who had spent 3 weeks looking forward to one photograph was about to step 18 inches too far. It was September 7th, 2017, in Central Florida. A large regional theme park was running its Sunday afternoon parade in front of an estimated 2,000 spectators gathered along the main route. Eunice Driggers was 67 and had spent 22 years working in a school cafeteria before retiring 4 years earlier. She was up every morning by 6 a.m. out of habit, tended her garden before the heat set in, and usually had dinner ready by 5 p.m. She moved slowly, was hard of hearing on her left side, and when she focused on something in front of her, she rarely looked away. Her daughter had brought the family to the park for the day. Eunice's 2 grandchildren were participating in the park's junior performer program, placed in costume roles near the front of the afternoon parade. Eunice had been talking about seeing them in it for 3 weeks. She positioned herself along the barrier rope on a slight downhill section of the route well before the parade began, choosing a spot she believed would give her the best angle for a photograph. The closing float was a large, custom-built vehicle weighing approximately 5 tons, operated by a driver inside an enclosed compartment with sightlines limited to 2 small, forward-angled mirrors. The float followed the parade route slowly behind the final group of performers as it approached the slight downhill section near the finale stage. On the afternoon of the incident, the parade ran on schedule. Eunice's grandchildren passed her position early in the parade in their costumes, approximately 35 feet ahead of the closing float when it reached her section of the route. Eunice had stepped 18 inches past the barrier rope to get a clear photograph. She was focused on her camera and facing away from the approaching float. The closing float entered the downhill grade, approaching the finale stage. The driver applied the brakes at the standard point on the route, but the braking response was weaker than expected, and the float continued rolling down the grade. The increase in speed was gradual enough that spectators behind the barrier did not immediately recognize it as a loss of control. Parade music and crowd noise filled the route. Eunice's hearing loss on her left side meant she did not register the float approaching behind her. She was still looking through her camera when the float reached her position. The float's front left wheel assembly struck Eunice from behind. Several dozen spectators on both sides of the barrier witnessed the impact. The driver did not have a sight line to her position at ground level from his mirrors. The float traveled an additional 14 feet before coming to a stop against a decorative barrier at the base of the grade. Eunice died at the scene from crush injuries to the chest and abdomen. Her grandchildren were in costume 35 feet ahead, facing the stage when the impact occurred. Her daughter was standing behind the barrier rope approximately 20 feet away and witnessed the full sequence. The case was ruled accidental. During the subsequent review, investigators confirmed that the float's brake system had been the subject of 3 written complaints from the driver earlier in the season describing delayed braking on downhill grades. The reports had been logged by operations staff, but were never forwarded to the maintenance department. The float driver was not criminally charged. The park reached a civil settlement with Eunice's family within 4 months. Her grandchildren were escorted from the parade route by park staff before being returned to their mother. Eunice stepped 18 inches past the rope to get a better shot. That was all it took. In eastern Tennessee, a woman who almost didn't go through with it was about to find out what happens when nobody checks the equipment. If you made it to the end of this one, you already know if this channel is for you. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. It was June 14th, 2016 in eastern Tennessee. A mid-sized regional theme park was running at near full capacity on a Saturday afternoon, with families spread across the grounds and a steady line forming at a bungee jump attraction near the park's east entrance plaza. Sheila Bundick was 28 and had spent the last 4 years as a shift supervisor at a mattress retail store 2 hours from the park. She kept her head down, showed up on time, and avoided making waves. Most evenings followed the same pattern: television, takeout, and bed after midnight. She had come to the park that day with her boyfriend, Danny, who had planned the trip as a weekend outing. The bungee jump had been his idea from the start. Sheila hesitated when they reached the attraction, telling him she wasn't sure she wanted to do it. Danny encouraged her to try it at least once while they were already there. At the booth, a staff member moved through the safety briefing quickly. The line was long, and the operator had been rotating people through at pace all afternoon. Sheila signed the waiver without reading it and stepped past the posted instruction sign without stopping to review it. When her turn came, Danny suddenly changed his mind. He stepped away from the harness station and moved to the platform railing to watch instead. Sheila was already strapped into the rig. The harness equipment being used that afternoon had been serviced earlier in the week following a routine strap replacement. Sheila stepped to the edge, rocked forward twice, and jumped. The primary bungee cord extended and caught as designed. The initial drop and deceleration were normal. On the first rebound snap, the moment the cord pulls the jumper sharply back upward and the load spikes across all connection points. One of the connection points suddenly gave way. Sheila separated from the cord at approximately 25 feet above the base mat. The crash mat below was a layered foam and air bladder pad standard to bungee operations of that era. It was built to cushion-controlled pendulum-style landings where the jumper remains tethered and swings to a gradual stop. A vertical free fall from 25 feet onto that surface was outside what the mat was rated to absorb. Sheila landed flat on her back. The impact forced the air from her lungs, and she remained motionless on the mat. Danny watched the full sequence from the platform railing above: the rebound, the separation, and the fall. A vendor staff member at the base mat reached her within seconds. Sheila was conscious and responded to his voice, but did not appear to understand what had happened or where she was. She was transported from the park that afternoon, but died 6 hours later from internal hemorrhaging, caused by severe internal trauma and multiple spinal injuries. The case was ruled accidental. During the subsequent equipment examination, investigators confirmed that the carabiner clip had not been fully seated in the gate locking mechanism, though from the outside it appeared closed. The unseated gate was identified as the direct cause of the release during the rebound. The vendor's operating contract with the park was suspended and never reinstated. The technician who performed the harness reassembly was identified through internal work logs. No criminal charges were filed against any individual. Danny provided a full account as the only witness present at platform level. The vendor's business ceased operations within the year. Sheila went to the park that day because it was easier than saying no, and was dead by that evening from a clip no one thought to test. In Central Florida, a man walking alone on a rare day off was about to pass too close to something that looked completely fine from the outside. It was August 19th, 2017, in Central Florida. A large regional theme park was running at peak summer attendance. Near the park's main thoroughfare, a stretch of themed landscaping lined both sides of the walkway, anchored by a series of large decorative prop trees that had been permanent fixtures since the park's original construction in the late 1990s. Ricky Gafford was 44 and worked long-haul trucking routes across the southeastern United States. Most of his time was spent on the road, sleeping in his cab between deliveries and stopping at diners along the interstate. That week, he had a rare 2-day gap between routes and was passing through Central Florida on the way to his next pickup. Instead of continuing straight through, he decided to spend a few hours at the park, something he had never visited before. Like many truck drivers used to wide-open rest areas and highway stops, Ricky tended to walk along the quieter edges of crowded spaces rather than staying in the middle of the flow. As he moved along the thoroughfare, he drifted toward the landscaped border beside the path, just a few feet from the base of the decorative tree line. It was mid-morning and the thoroughfare was moderately busy. Ricky walked along the left edge of the path, slightly inside the planted border separating the walkway from the landscape bed at the base of the tree line. He was not looking up. One of the prop trees nearest to him toppled suddenly and laterally across the walkway over approximately 3 to 4 seconds. Several guests in the immediate area witnessed it fall. A family of 4 walking approximately 15 feet behind. Ricky saw the tree come down. 2 guests seated at a nearby outdoor eating area had a direct sight line to the base of the tree at the moment of the collapse. The fiberglass shell and internal armature struck Ricky across the upper back and head. The structure weighed several hundred pounds. He did not move after the impact. Park staff reached the scene within minutes. Ricky died at the scene from blunt force trauma to the head and cervical spine. He had been at the park for less than 2 hours, and there was no one with him. The subsequent structural assessment explained what had caused the collapse. The tree that fell was approximately 22 feet tall, constructed around a central steel rod armature embedded in a concrete base during the park's original installation. Its exterior was a fiberglass and resin shell, shaped and painted to resemble a mature oak. From the outside, it had looked solid. No cracking, no leaning, no surface deterioration. But the internal steel rod had been exposed to years of water intrusion through hairline cracks in the base seal, a slow accumulation of moisture working at the metal from the inside. Corrosion of this type can progress internally for years without any external warning signs. The base rod had been deteriorating for an estimated 3 to 4 years before it failed. The inspection records told a different story about what had been done to catch it. The decorative trees along that thoroughfare had been noted as visually checked and cleared in the 2 preceding seasons. The inspection process involved a walk-past visual assessment only. No structural testing, no base integrity check, and no internal examination of any armature had ever been performed on the prop trees since their original installation nearly 2 decades earlier. There was nothing in the inspection protocol that would have found what was happening inside. The assessment of the remaining prop trees confirmed corrosion damage of varying degrees in several other base armatures. The trees were removed from the park grounds within the following week. The case was ruled accidental. No criminal charges were filed. A man walking through a park on his day off was killed by a tree that looked completely fine from the outside. Next, in northern Ohio, a teenager who had been counting down to that Saturday was about to breathe in something nobody in that room could see coming. It was March 7th, 2015, in northern Ohio. a family entertainment center attached to a regional mall, hosted an indoor go-kart track that had been operating for just under 2 years. The facility ran both walk-in sessions and private bookings and was considered a mid-range option for birthday parties and group events in the area. Gary Pittman Jr. was 16 years old and a sophomore in high school. He lived with his mother, his grandmother, and an older sister in a 2-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from the mall. His days followed the rhythm of most teenagers: school during the week, time on his phone late into the evening, and weekends that never seemed long enough. He was restless in the way that made him hard to keep in one place and almost impossible to keep still in any environment that had noise and movement in it. He was not a bad kid, he was just always in motion. His grandmother had booked the outing 3 weeks in advance, a Saturday morning slot. 2 hours, private booking, 11 friends, and 6 adults. Gary had been talking about it since the invitation went out. The indoor track was already loud and busy when their session began, the gas-powered carts circling continuously once the race started. The facility's ventilation system had been running inconsistently for several weeks before the party. Staff had mentioned the problem to the shift manager on several occasions, but no maintenance request had been filed and no repair was scheduled. Adults started feeling effects around the 35-minute mark. One mother sat down along the track wall, assuming she was coming down with something. A staff member noticed 2 attendees sitting near the pit lane and attributed it to bumped carts and overstimulation. Nobody connected the symptoms to the air. Gary was the smallest and lightest person at the party. Carbon monoxide spreads quickly through enclosed air, but body weight and breathing rate determine how quickly blood CO concentration reaches dangerous levels. Adolescents can be significantly lighter than the adults present, and physical activity increases breathing rate. The same airborne concentration can therefore produce a higher toxic load in a smaller, more active body. Gary had been physically active throughout the session, and his exposure relative to his size was more severe than anyone else present. Around the 40-minute mark, Gary stopped steering. His cart drifted to the side rail and came to rest against the barrier. A staff member walking the track perimeter approached, assuming he wanted to stop. Gary did not respond when spoken to. He was lifted from the cart and carried outside. The remaining attendees followed within minutes, and most began recovering in the open air almost immediately. Gary did not recover. He was the only person in the building who never regained consciousness after the initial exposure. The concentration of carbon monoxide relative to his body weight and his elevated breathing rate during the session produced a level of brain injury that was irreversible. He was removed from life support 2 days later without regaining any brain activity. The subsequent investigation determined that the carts were gas-powered and ran continuously during each session. The building relied on a primary exhaust fan to remove the fumes. But when the fans stopped functioning, exhaust began accumulating inside the track area. Carbon monoxide is colorless and odorless, leaving no visible warning signs for the guests inside. The case was ruled accidental. The facility had no carbon monoxide detectors anywhere in the building, not yet required by code in that state at the time. The entertainment center closed permanently within 3 months. 11 other attendees were treated and recovered fully. Gary's grandmother was among them. She had been inside the building for the entire duration of the session. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.